everybody has data. We were talking to CDOs in Brisbane, and they're saying, "Oh, we've got tons of data. We're data rich." And then we're, yeah, but what do you do with it?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Redefining Sales podcast, where we reimagine and redefine sales in a digital world. In this new series, we have absolutely scoured the world to bring you only the best of the very best. We will be working with each of the thought leaders to unpack all of their years of experience, their pearls of wisdom and nuggets of gold into bite-sized chunks that will enable you to redefine your sales. Welcome to the Redefining Sales podcast. My name is Abby White. This week on our podcast, we have Rohan Persaud, who is Director of Channels and Alliances for Sisense. Now, luckily, I did have a voice at the time of recording. I have now lost my voice for this intro, but in the recording, you are going to hear from Rohan about how he plays a high-performance game, what it takes to be a high-performance seller in the IT industry, and you're going to hear quite a lot about strong partnerships. Rohan's experience is very much in the channel ecosystem alliances space. So we talk quite a bit there about partnerships. We also tap into best career advice Rohan's ever heard, and then how you can leverage AI and business intelligence for your growth opportunity. So we cover quite a lot of ground and quite a few different angles in this conversation. Now, if you have not met Rohan before, Rohan has over 20 years experience developing successful partner ecosystems and driving sustainable client business growth across Australia and Asia Pacific. And as I mentioned, his current role is Director of Channels and Alliances at Sisense. And if you have not come across Sisense, a little bit about them. They go beyond traditional business intelligence by providing organizations with the ability to infuse analytics everywhere, embed in both the customer and employee applications and workflows. And Sisense customers are breaking through the barriers of analytics adoption by going beyond the dashboard. And they look at how they can have highly customizable AI-driven analytics cloud platform that infuses intelligence at the right place at the right time, every time. They've worked with over 2,000 global companies. And so we actually tap into that in this conversation around how business intelligence can be used and that data can be used to help drive growth. So we probably go down a slightly more technical conversation than we do usually. But for many of our audience who are in the IT arena, this probably is a fantastic one for you to get your teeth stuck into. So enjoy. Welcome to the Redefining Sales podcast. Rohan, welcome. We are very, very, very excited to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
We've already started chatting off air about lots of things. So I'm going to get straight stuck in because I have so many questions that I want to be talking to you about today.
Great stuff.
I want to start out by just talking about with sort of into the new financial year at the time of recording. I know a lot of people, I've just walked out of a meeting myself where people are putting together their strategy for the year ahead. I kind of want to get your lens on what opportunities you're seeing for growth and sort of kickstart there as people are in strategy mode at this time of year.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've had a tough couple of years, right? So we've had COVID. People forget we've had bushfires and floods. We've had mice plagues. I think there's mice plagues in part of the country. We've had trade issues with some of our big partners. We're going into recession. And these are really turbulent times. And yet some organizations have really done well and are thriving, and some organizations aren't. And so there's a lot of organizations, companies starting to question, okay, well, how do we really take advantage of what's going on, or at least what are the lessons learned? And these are really going to drive the opportunities that we see in the marketplace. And the first one, when we ask our clients and customers, it's, all around the accelerated digital transformation. I mean, we've known about this for donkey's ages. We've been talking about it for 20, 30 years, but most companies have been going about it at their own pace, which is, rightfully so. We got the strategy, we understand what we need to do. And then all of a sudden COVID drops on us. Nobody's going into the office anymore. And we're seeing a virtualization of processes and practices and policies and procedures. And it's like, oh my goodness, we've got to accelerate that whole digital transformation story. So it's really about rethinking how we do things, and trying to get an advantage of that. And then the second big, again, lesson learned or piece of learning is these turbulent times have put a lot of pressure on our systems. And it's been a pressure test or a stress test of our existing systems. And technology is supposed to be able to enable us or help us and get our tasks done. And we always talk about getting stuff done, right? So technology is supposed to be an enabler. And yet if something like this happens and all of a sudden you're seeing your legacy systems starting to fail, or those new systems you've acquired not matching up, not giving you the ROI that you anticipated. And that's been a big issue, right? So it's really assessing the systems that we have today. And are we going to reinvent ourselves on the tail end? Or are we just going to resume business and just forget about what's happened and hope it doesn't happen again, right? So those are the real big opportunities. And when we have conversations with customers and they say, okay, how does an organization like Zoom, okay, that's an easy one. They did really well, 10,000% increase in the number of subscribers, right? They did well. But then if you look at some other less obvious ones, Kohl's and Woolies with their online delivery services went through the roof, right? And gaming, everybody's at home just playing games. So they did really well, but real travel and airlines, restaurants, that whole business niche and area, they really struggled. And it becomes, okay, well, how do we survive? And the answer really is in data. I really do believe that. It's like everybody's data rich, data's cheap to store. So there's data there, but it's really, okay, how do we address that data transformation story? That's number one. And number two is, what systems do we have? And, do we really need to think or rethink what we have in place now?
So I've just written that down. I love that you've just said data transformation story. That has just absolutely got my attention. We've just been doing a huge amount of research all around the future of sales, and you would be across a huge amount of this. And what I think is fascinating, you talk about digital transformation. I'm fascinated within that sales transformation journey, that the trend towards data-driven selling, data-driven marketing, and the challenge around how do you actually use your data to be meaningful. And, you and I play in the same world. It's a topic of conversation that many people are trying to solve. So can you talk to us about that? Because I think that is really, really, really fascinating in terms of the data transformation story. And I want to dig into that.
Yeah, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they were talking about, data-driven decision-making, right? And back then it was DSS, decision support software. And I was doing a keynote, and the guy behind me got up there and said, oh yeah, data decision software support. I'm like, oh, geez, this is exactly what we talked about 25 years ago. But that's it. It's the question is, how do you take data, turn it into information into insight into action? And now the whole story is about action at the point of decision making, right? So it's even going a little bit further. I talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to come back to the sales aspect, but when you look at the evolution of technology, and I'm in the BI space, business intelligence, and I've been there for 25 years. And I used to work with guys when I was a fresh, bushy-tailed newbie who'd been in the field for 25 years. So it's been around for a long time. But when I joined, it was like the Cognoses and the business objects, all these guys, client server technology, you go into big mainframes and you say, okay, fine, here are my cards, go, generate a report. The report might take a month to get, but then you're so excited because, you've got some data that's turned into information, you can make some decisions. And that was the best at that time. And then you look a couple years later when you had the Tableaus and clicks and et cetera, it was all about data virtualization and visualization, I should say. And it's, desktop data democratization. Everybody can get a dashboard and take a look at their data. And again, sales strategies sort of evolved there. And then you look at today where it's, emerging technology where people are saying, okay, fine. Lots of organizations are spending incredible sums on, analytics, but the same people, Gartner was saying, the same people are spending money aren't getting the ROI that they anticipated. And the answer is, well, it's because they're mired down in lack of adoption. People just aren't using the analytics, and we'll come back to that. So the sales strategies, I think really come back to, we go round in circles. Sometimes we've all been on sales trainings and we've all done all the methodologies. But I think it comes down to two things. You just have to be you have to be relevant to the organizations that you're going into, and you have to, so being a trusted advisor, I think, is absolutely critical. And you got to be solving business problems. So business problems will change and sort of morph potentially. But when you go into an organization or a company, you're trying to help them, and you're playing this trusted advisory role, you're not uncovering business problems. They know what business problems they have. They just might not be able to define them. And I think that's the key strategy now when we're talking about the whole, data-driven decision making. Is how do you uncover those problems that they might have? And I think, Abby, I do a lot of work with new sales reps, and they go in and they respond to an RFI or an RFP, and it's functions, features, speeds, feeds. This is what they want to answer. And I'm saying, just because they asked you these questions doesn't mean you're answering the questions that they have, which is, let's move upstream. Let's say it's I worked with a logistics company, and it was the same thing, what your speeds and feeds and what can you do? And then it's, okay, well, why are you asking these questions? Well, if you go to the person's boss who submitted the RFI, it's like, well, we need to change our system. Okay, well, why do you need to change your system? Okay, go up a step, talk to the next boss and say, okay, well, we've got problems with our customers. Okay, well, what are the problems? They're not happy. Okay, next boss. Well, what are you trying to do? Well, we're trying to drive market share increase by 2%, but we've got customer retention issues, and, it's a cost issue. I want these guys working on something else. And I think that whole data-driven sales strategy is, don't get stuck down in the weeds. It's always data into information, information into insight, insight into action, action at the point of decision making. So it's uncovering, not uncovering the problems. It's redefining and being able to define those issues, and tying it back to an ROI. Everybody has data. And the last thing, I sort of mentioned this. We were talking to CDOs in Brisbane, and they're saying, "Oh, we've got tons of data. We're data rich." And then we're, yeah, but what do you do with it? Right. And what are you doing with it? Well, we're sitting on it because, we've got so much of this, let's go to the CPO. Okay, now it's your job to do some of this. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do with it? Right. Am I supposed to monetize it? Am I supposed to solve a problem? So it's going in there and having those sorts of conversations about not just what we're seeing today, but, future proofing your organization. And as a trusted advisor, you're being relevant to that organization. We always look for a champion in companies when we're selling. But again, organizations are looking for a champion in the vendors and the partners that they work with as well.
So I'm going to come back to that sales rep example because I've got questions on that. But before I do, you talked about, actually being able to do something with your data, actually being able to get an ROI. So I do want to tap into Sisense at this point as well, and what you're doing there around BI, business intelligence, and obviously how you're leveraging AI and how you're doing that. Because actually, when I started reading the Sisense story, that's where I was emailing you this morning. I started getting really excited because I think it's really relevant that no one's problem is I've got a lack of data. Everyone's problem is how do I do something with it? And I think that's where it's interesting for sales and marketing now, because it's actually leveraging that data to make it meaningful, be able to use it, and so on. So I really just want to tap into there what you're seeing within business analytics, AI that you offer with Sisense that's helping around these problems that we're talking about.
And so when I started 25 years ago in BI, and when I sort of got out 20 some years later, I thought I was out and I was free, right? And the Sisense people came around and they were saying, please come take a look at this. I'm like, I've moved on. But once I sat down and I explored not only the technology and the business problems that they were addressing, I was bought in. I mean, this is exactly where I would have hoped, the first generation guys would have got to. By this point, it's absolutely amazing. So, when you look at next generation analytics platforms, of which Sisense is one, the issue I mentioned before about adoption, right? Data literacy is key. I mean, you go to any conference and you hear about data literacy and data adoption. So if you have a CEO who's spending lots of money every year, he's going to ask the question, why am I investing in business intelligence and analytics when we're getting very little out of it? And Gartner did a big report and they said, well, 30% of people use analytics with an organization. Not that dashboards are dead, they're the new Excel. Everybody will have dashboards, but it's how do you leverage it? How do you go beyond the dashboard? And this is where a platform like Sisense, so a next generation platform, first of all, has to be able to connect to everything and anything. So you're talking about your relational databases, your CRMs, your ERPs, Excel spreadsheets. It's got to be really fleet with connectors, using API connectors, born on the cloud, but also offering on-premise sort of capabilities. And then you've got to be able to offer either the capacity to bring data into to massage data in a cube, or whether you want a live data stream to handle billions and billions and billions of rows of data. And when we were at IBM, they used to teach us the 4 V's of data, right? It was velocity and veracity and volume and, all these things. The velocity, I think, was, but and that's the problem. Data just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the new platforms have to be able to address something. They do. And then it's also, and I'm coming back to the point, I think one of the question is, when you look at users, and sometimes we forget that users are early adopters and consumers of advanced analytics. So Abby, before you go to bed at night, you might turn on Netflix and you want to watch a movie, and it says, okay, Abby, we recommend Son of Tiger King or whatever is out there these days, right? Nobody asks. You're making a decision at that point. You're not worried about it, cloud or the AI that's behind that, or the machine learning that's been driving those recommendations, or the predictive algorithms. You don't care. All you know is you're making a decision, and you want to be able to, perform an action. And that's what we expect in business world as well, right? So why can't we have that? Why do I have to have a degree in AI or SQL or, be a data science when all I want to do is read these charts on the dashboard? And I get bar charts and pie charts, some of these newer charts, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know what it tells me. Well, why can't you just push a button and then have the 10 points in English saying, this is what this chart says? And as you start drilling down, it changes, right? So it should be easy to use to increase that data literacy. But then again, at the same time, have that ability for data scientists to go in and sort of play around and do their coding stuff. And then the neat thing is going beyond that, infusing it and embedding it within your workflows. So we use Slack, and people might use Microsoft Teams or even just email. Could you imagine, instead of having to go to your dashboard, because nobody starts off the day in a dashboard, but being able to go in Slack and all of a sudden you get a message saying, hey, your campaign, your marketing campaign isn't producing the results that you wanted. Okay, that's just a message. That's an alert. That's not difficult. But what do you want to do? And then you have actions right there. Do you want to pause the campaign, hit a button, API call goes out, cancels the campaign in Google Ads, call a meeting, done, create a deck, done. It goes to your dashboard, pulls everything from your dashboard, puts all the natural language in it. I mean, that's a sort of experience. And that is the next generation. So when we talk about evolutional change, it's like, generation 1, generation 2, next generation. So that's what the users are expecting. It's, we want to get stuff done. We don't care how. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I asked if I asked my parents what cloud was, they wouldn't know, and we still have conversations about portal versus porthole. No, nothing to do with sailing, right? But that's a sort of conversations I think that we're seeing these days.
Yeah. And actually, before we go back to my sales question, I just want to stop on that if anyone's listening going, whoa, like this sounds really cool for big businesses because you've got to have a lot of money to do this. It sounds a little bit complicated for me. If anyone's a small business listening, what's the journey how do you start this journey as a small business? Because I don't want anyone walking away going, this is just for big business, not for me.
No. And a lot of our organizations are, ISV, startups, organizations who want to monetize data or do an embed, and the true value of an embedded next generation platform is you can embed it as well, right? So you're creating something. We'll come back when we talk about monetization of data, which is a subject that pops up everywhere, but any organization. So we've got large multinationals, global organizations to small startups. It's what's the business problem you're trying to solve, and then let's work together.
Okay, I like that. So coming back to before, because I don't want to lose this question, you were talking about you do some coaching for some more junior or new to sales people, and you talked about taking them away from sort of the nitty gritty and actually coming back to the customer problem. How do you start to create that change? And I'm really interested in that because I think that we notice it a lot with sales teams where people are very used to features, functions, but even in a small business world, as business owners, sometimes we just want to talk about our product or service and what we do. And so how do you start to create that step change so that you're having a different sales conversation?
And I come from the old school where cadence calls and deal reviews, and people hate those terms, but they can be gentle as well. And when we work with new reps, we used to be quite just processing, right? So my background is organizational development. That's where I started off at Cognos. So it's all about performance coaching and also process coaching. And when you get somebody who's new and it's exciting, you get an RFP. Hey, we've got an RFP. Somebody's interested in this, and it's like, yeah, you and 4 other people, right? So okay, that's and you're going to do, was it 10 phone calls to get 1 meeting and 10 meetings to get 1 deal. So you got to have a lot of these RFPs, but it's asking why. And I think you can ask why 5 or 6 times where somebody gets really, really irritated with you. So you got to find different ways. But it's like, why do they want to buy? Well, they're looking at a new system. Well, why are they looking at a new system? Because they're not getting these results. Well, why not? They're not getting these results. And you start processing them that way. And a lot of times it's like, I don't know. Okay, well, you've got to ask the right questions. So go back in there, because then you become more relevant. But just why, in a gentle way, of course. Otherwise, they're just spinning their wheels, and it can get frustrating for them.
Yeah, I like that. So you talked about, in terms of what are we seeing working in sales right now? Because that's what I'm fascinated with. I think there's a step change in what's working. I think COVID is really shaking it up. There's some things that stand the test of time and stand true, but I think there's other things that are starting to change, and where what we're seeing working as an effective sales strategy today is slightly different. So I'm curious to get your lens on what are you seeing working in sales? There's the fundamentals you've talked to, like being relevant and being the trusted advisor and solving problem. But beyond that, what are you seeing working?
I always go back to staying relevant. I mean, it's a pet peeve of mine when I see somebody go into a meeting and they're not prepared. They haven't read the annual report. They haven't, really done their homework. They're just based off, hey, somebody wants to talk to us, and they go in. And then I see other sales reps, and these are reps that have been, very, very successful over their career. They do take the time to prepare. They are up late at night reading reports and seeing what their competitors are doing. You have to be prepared. I mean, that's the first thing. And you have to follow up. I mean, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I tell a lot of sales reps, you should always be learning because technology changes, but you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. It's not an issue. It's not nobody will think any less of you for not having all the answers. They will think less of you if you don't live up to the commitment that you make in the meeting that let me find out and come back to you within 24 hours. That's the big difference. So I think it's being prepared and following up. And I know that's timeless, but it doesn't get done. Even though you could sit down and talk to somebody, it's just inherently, do you want to be successful?
And it's funny, I'm smiling at you because we talk about, so at Sales Redefined, we talk about so many topics to do with sales, and we go in all different places. No matter which size business we talk to, no matter what we go, how far we've gone, the number one thing that always comes up is that follow-up isn't being done. And we embed with companies Follow-up Friday, and it seems to be the top takeaway. So out of hundreds of things that I talk about, people go, yeah, Follow-Up Friday really should do that. And it seems to be a challenge that is just consistent.
Yeah, I think there's 3 things that every sales rep has to put into their calendar. One is learning. And we used to have a boss and say, listen, just carve out every Friday morning, 9 to 10. I don't care if you're browsing websites, as long as they're related to the industry, or you're taking an online course, or you're learning the language. Okay, you're new to insurance. Okay, well, here's how insurance people speak. You better at least be relevant. An hour for learning minimum. Follow-up should be done right away. Build that into your schedule. Meeting with X, and then afterwards sit down in a coffee shop or whatever. And then also sales hygiene. I mean, whatever CRM system you're using. Because you'll never get away from that. And that's just good hygiene. Internally, you've got to build up your profile as well. I think that's very important. Those are 3 key meetings, I'd say, or chunks of time people should put in their calendar and just adhere to them religiously.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. And it's interesting you threw in build your profile, because I think that one's sort of more come about in the past few years, and that people historically had thought, nah, don't need to do that. So what are you seeing there around building profiles? I'm really curious.
Yeah, I read a book about 20 years ago, and it's somewhat relevant, except it doesn't have the social media aspect of today. And it's called How to Be a Star at Work. And there's a guy called Robert Kelly, and he went around and said, hey, GE and IBM and HP and all these guys go to Harvard and MIT, and they hire the smartest guys, but they're not all stars at work. You know, you follow them 5 years later. It's not always the smartest guys who are who become stars. It's the people that build their profile, and they do that a couple ways. They network throughout the organization, right? So people know who you are, you know who people are, you can sort of get things done. You're presenting effectively. And then this guy goes through a few things, but he talked about your profile, right? How people see you. And you've got to really think about your brand, not just to your customers, but internally. The couple things, you just basics, following up we mentioned, but also being trustworthy. I mean, if you say you're going to do something, do it, right? I mean, because if you don't do it, after a couple of times, people just, again, push to the side, right? But profile is very, very important these days. And especially with social media, I think people should be leveraging that a lot more.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's, you don't have to put, we don't want you to see your breakfast or your kids on LinkedIn, but it's, building your professional profile. And as a sales professional, I think that's so key right now, particularly where we're seeing the change towards digital first. Before you go to any meeting, they're going to have checked you out on LinkedIn. I was on your LinkedIn as soon as I heard about you. It's the first thing I did.
Yeah, exactly. And today's buyers are the same way, right? Will research your organization before they contact you. And so if you're not doing that, again, it says a lot about you.
So I want to change you onto a slightly different topic, same but different, is around a lot of your time has been in sort of very senior channel roles. So building out the channel, building out ecosystems and partnerships. And I really want to talk to you about, some of the growth opportunities there. Like how do you build a really engaged community and ecosystem, and how do you build your channel? Because I think that one thing we notice right now with some of the IT vendors that we work with, everyone wants to make sure they're still relevant to their partners. They've still got that buy-in. How do we get the partners to do our education and our enablement? And how do they come with us, not the other vendor? And so I think there's a really interesting thing there of trying to I keep and hold that intention and engagement. So I'm really curious, given your vast experience in the channel, what you're seeing there as the opportunities.
Well, thanks for the shout out for channels. And if anybody's listening, channels is an amazing career to have, right? And it's difficult, but it's so rewarding. I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, channels, you're the donuts and relationship guy. You go for meetings every week and just, hey, how you doing with the partners?" And, channels has a very significant and strategic impact on any organization, right? And all the large organizations have moved to a partner first model. And again, a lot of the startups have as well. And they just understand that you can scale and you have better subject matter expertise with partners as they grow their business. And it's just the way that you have to adopt. I mean, it's not all or nothing, but, partners have an important role. Now, when I started off, again, there was a perception that channels, okay, what does channels really contribute? But when you look at channels, I mean, there's channels sales, there's channels business development, there's channels management, there's channels operations. And I've done them all. I think the largest role I had was in IBM. I ran the growth markets for data and analytics, 1,400 partners. You're not working with 1,400 partners. You're probably working with the top 10%, right, who drive 90% of your revenue. But it's a fantastic area to get into. And then you're looking at like the alphabet soup of organizations like VARs and VADs and OEMs and ISVs and ISIs and GSIs and on and on and on. But fundamentally, if you want to engage a partner and you want to be successful, you have to understand that they're a business, and you have to have a business conversation around what's in it for them. Why them? Why now? Why us? How are you going to make money together? I mean, I don't want to get cutthroat and think about get into just say we're going to make some money, but that's what businesses do, right? And they're saying, okay, fine. And they've got choice. They have the ability to go out and work with any vendor they want. And I challenge my partners. I said, listen, go out and work with any vendor, but I'll prove to you, just through our relationships, that you won't need anybody else. That's my job, is to ensure that we build up a strong strategic relationship. Your business is growing, our business is growing, and we have a mutual relationship that's very, very strategic. And people forget that, Abby. It's we've worked for large organizations where the partners are perceived to work for us, right? So you work for us, so you'll do this, and you'll do this, and you'll do this. And they don't. So there's a healthy respect. But you start off with a business conversation, and then when you get into, you anchor around a real deal or real opportunity, so they can evaluate you, right? So you've just spent a month talking about how, we're having this love fest, how things would be great. Well, are you living up to everything you've said? Because I'm investing time, money, and resources to build up a practice, whether it's Sisense or any other business. So are you reciprocating? This is the testing moment, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really important to understand where they're coming from, what their business model is, as well as the fact that constantly reminding everybody that they don't work for us, they work with us, but that's sort of the value. And again, partners, there are a variety of partners, and it might be a sell to, sell through, sell with. There's such a variety. You have to be agile, fleet, and just understand that with partners you can really scale, but they need support, and that's your role.
It's funny, when I was at IBM, so we've got our common ground there, except we established earlier you were in the cool part of IBM, which I'm coming back to that. But one of the best things they did with us as grads was, just when we thought we had it all figured out as grads, because obviously you know everything at that point, they threw us out on secondment to the channel. And we had to go work for a channel partner for 12 months and not get paid on revenue or IBM revenue, but suddenly they looked at the margin and you go, oh, hang on. And you got to see, because they got rid of our IBM badges. You worked from the partner's office. You were one of them. And you suddenly saw that, oh my gosh, these partners don't just wake up and go, I love IBM. They've got all these vendors coming up to their office every single day, fighting for their attention, showing them lots of love. And it was probably the slap to the face that us young grads all needed to suddenly understand what you're just talking about, which is they don't work for us. And how do we make it interesting for them so that it's a healthy business and profitable for them? So I think I love what you're talking to there.
Well, when I joined Sisense, I went out to my top 50, 60 partners around Asia Pacific and said, this is where I am, guys, and this is the story, and rah, look at this. And they said, well, most of them said our business model doesn't allow for us to take on a new partner, or a new vendor, or we're already entrenched with this other product, and it's going to be difficult. So I've got to spend more time winning them over. But they have a choice. I go back, it's the old love them or lose them. They have a choice, and we should never be restrictive, saying, okay, you cannot sell anything except our product, because they've got a business, they're growing. It's up to us. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that they don't need anybody else.
Mm. And do you think that's the key to building the strong relationships in the channel, where people just, there's that longevity in the relationship?
Longevity, yes, but I think it goes back to establishing trust. And if you say you're going to do, if you do what you say you're going to do, and you're providing value to them, it can accelerate that relationship very, very quickly. But some of us have been around for a long time and can pick up the phone and talk to various partners and get some advice. But even for new people starting, it's just the passion. I think passion is something that is just contagious. And if you're excited and really passionate and really enjoy what you're doing, partners pick up on that as well. And people want to work with people like that. So partners in the channel world, again, there's a little bit of that reputation of, they just go out and have meetings. But again, if they're business meetings and they drive growth. When I was with IBM, we drove and we had metrics around number of new partners and the value to bring in, a number of new clients, a number of new deals and net revenue. And we would map it out. And at the end of every quarter, we said, this is what we did, ta-da. And when you look at your accomplishments from a dollar and financial perspective, it's pretty impressive. I think any channel person listening should be sending out a quarterly report to their bosses saying, here's what we've done, here's dollars and cents, and here's the impact that we've had on the business.
Yeah, I really like that. And you've spoken, actually, it's a bit of a theme coming through for me. You've spoken, around how do you get the ROI? How do you get the dollars and cents? And I think that that's often missing from some of the conversations. And it sounds obvious, but businesses need sales to make a living. We need money coming in the doors, and we can't all do it for hugs. So I really like that a lot of the conversations that you're pulling out here are actually, how do we come back to, getting a tangible result and outcome?
It's business, right? We've got a business, partners have a business, and our joint customers, they have a business, and we've got to find the way that we can support each other and grow mutually. And it's not competitive. It's like the customer, the partner, and the vendor can all grow together in a great relationship. And I'm just seeing more and more of that now with partner-led strategies and organizations now. And there's a lot of questions asked at the senior level about, what does this mean, partner-led? What does that mean? We've never done that. So don't worry. Here's how we're going to grow our business. Here's how we're going to help our customers. And again, it comes back. Strategy is really three things, right? Increasing revenue, increasing customer satisfaction, and then also, maintaining or constraining costs or cost constraints. If you can address those by what you're doing in any line of business, I think you're well away.
Yep. So I ask everyone who comes on with an IT background the same question around, what do you think it takes to play a high performance game in IT sales? Because I think I consider IT sales one of the more competitive industries that I've been a part of. And I think there is a certain level of sink or swim. And I think there's some very competitive nature to it. I know we've touched on quite a few things already, but if you had to sort of wrap it up around, what do you think the keys are to success in playing a high performance game in sales in IT, what would you say it is?
Yep. And I'd say it's in sales and expanded. When we're looking at high tech and IT, number one, you got to be a troubleshooter, right? Yep. You've got to be a problem solver. You've got to think out of the box. Again, customers have issues. You're redefining the problems or helping them redefine the problems and establishing that ROI. So a lot of these are unique, right? Every organization is unique, and you've got to be able to think out of the box. I see some salespeople go in with just an order. Okay, you want 4 licenses here and 2 of this and 3 of this. And it's like, okay, well, what are new ways of getting this done? What are new ways of going to market? I'll give you a quick example. It's like, if you've got a licensing model, which is just users or CPUs, why not look at what the customer wants, right? Are they MSP? Do they want to have back-to-back terms? You get flexible. So being a troubleshooter is very, very important. I think networking, again, is important. I always talk about living in the white space, and I think this has been spoken about before, but you'll see your name in an org chart, in a box, in an org chart. But to be successful in high tech, you've got to be that person who lives in the white space, right? You've got to have your ears open, your fingers and everything. You've got to provide that value. And I think the last one we talked about is always be learning. But again, it's not a weakness not knowing, right? It's not a weakness. It's just a weakness not following up.
Yeah, I love that. And so you can kind of tell it's coming through when I'm talking to you, like how much you've invested in your own development and your own career. So I'm also curious around, how do you personally, you've built an amazing career. How have you personally done that in terms of what are your non-negotiables for success? What has helped you go through that journey and your own career path?
I think the 3 things is, one is trust is a 2-way street, right? And I'm too trusting, and I know that's a weakness. I go in, and if somebody tells me they're going to do something, I just believe it. Yeah, it'll be done tomorrow, Friday, or tomorrow we close a business. Oh, great, fantastic! And I'll sort of go away thinking, oh, I've got this coming in tomorrow. That's right, because that's the way I am. If I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I'll do it. Yep. When people don't follow up, I'll give them a second chance, but very rarely a third. I mean, you can't waste your time and your career working with people that are not going to help you. Go back to your personal profile. Do you want to be known as a person that works with people that aren't high performers? You mentioned the cool stuff at our last company. I worked with some really high performers, and we went from one team to the next team, and we always pulled each other together because I knew I could count on them. So it's trust. Yeah. Don't live in the past. In sales, you're only as good as your last sale. And I hate to say it sound that way. We've closed big deals before, and everyone's rah, away you go. But, always look to the future and what you can do and where you want to go, and then map your way there. And accept feedback. It's people who close. I've always thought of myself as open-minded, and, I'll take feedback and we don't always enjoy it. I mean, feedback's feedback, right? But you learn because it's other people's perspective of you, and then you can sort of see, okay, take it, analyze it, and see how you can become a better person, I guess, or a better seller.
So I guess it's also that being coachable, having the growth mindset that you sort of seem to be embracing to help you play on your A game.
Yes, you've got to be coachable. I mean, you got to know when to be a leader. You've got to know when to be a follower, and you got to know when to be a team player. I really believe that's true of anybody in any organization, right? Different times call for you to play different roles. Sometimes you got to put your ego by the door and just take a follower role or a team member role. Sometimes you've got to put your fears by the door and become a leader and take that role as well. But definitely, you have to be coachable because people love giving feedback, right? People love telling you what you should be doing.
Yeah, feedback can be a good thing and a bad thing depending on how that's delivered to you. So on that,
I remember there's a funny story where one person came home after work and the partner said, how's your day? And the person said, oh yeah, okay. Do you want to talk about it? I thought we just did. Right. And that goes back to the whole, accepting feedback, but also being able to communicate, right, effectively.
Yeah. So we talked there about accepting feedback, and that makes me curious, what's been the best piece of career advice you've ever had that sort of worked for you?
Fail. And, so it's really fail fast, fail small, fail not often, and fail with others. And I did a talk at MBA program in Sydney, and walked in, and they're all, again, just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, all young guys and girls, and they're all like, I said, okay, and how many people think by doing this MBA you're going to have a successful career? And they all put up their hands. And I said, and how many people think you're going to fail? And nobody did. And I said, well, you're all wrong. You're all going to fail. You're going to fail many times because that's what life is all about. You're going to fail. And my favorite quote is a Japanese quote, Saru mo ki kara ochiru. Even monkeys fall from trees, right? So, and you got to embrace that. You're going to fail. But, when you fail, and I go back to that story we talked about earlier on, 10 calls to get one meeting, 10 meetings to get one sale. So you got 100 phone calls, right? So 99 times you've been told no. So again, that takes a different type of person to accept that. But you will make mistakes in your career. But just get over them really, really quickly, learn from them, make sure they're not huge, and you're not going to sink the entire organization. And make sure you're there with other people. Don't be a rogue, person out there, just failing all now. Make sure you're working as a team, and again, embrace the learning experiences. I think that's the best piece of feedback I've received in my career. And the boss said, yeah, you're going to fail. I'm like, oh, how can you say that? I'm good. Trust me, I'll get this done. You're going to fail. You're going to fail. Okay, I don't want to hear that every day, but he says, but fail quickly. Now move on to the next one, right? And that's how you learn.
Yep. And speaking of learning, you spoke earlier about, investing, whether that's 1 hour a week in your diary, learning, having that mindset of learning, and you referenced one book. I'm a book junkie, so this is a dangerous question for me. Best business book that has been most influential for you?
Crossing the Chasm was, again, I go back to the old ones. Crossing the Chasm, again, it's how to take new and innovative approaches. I think it was Jeffrey Moore. Another one was Good to Great. And that's all, and good is good. But if you want to be great, good is the enemy of great, right? And there's Getting to Yes. I was one that's kicking around for years and years and years. Getting to Yes is, again, how can you influence people, and how can you sort of get to the right answers that you're looking for and influence people. But those are the 3 or 4 books that I stand by when people ask me. I say, listen, go have a look at them. Some of them have not aged as well, but the concepts are there, right? The concepts are there. And we're still talking about replace Excel, and that's like 30 years later, right? All these sales campaigns, replace Excel. It's still there. Same as these sales strategies. And some things are so basic and fundamental to business and our careers that they're going to be there forever.
Yep. I like that. I've not heard of a couple of those. I've written them down, and I'm the book junkie that will be going and ordering those.
Great.
So I can't let you go without revisiting my point before. So you were in the cool part of IBM, working around Watson. Definitely one of the cool kids. I've got to ask, what were some of your best learnings? Because I think when I look at it and I look at Watson and I look at IBM, I'm like, you were in the fun part and you were doing so many fun things. Like, what did that teach you learning in that environment?
Just that technology is evolving so quickly, and that I think sometimes technology evolves faster than we can consume it. And I talked about that before. I mean, we have the Netflix type of experience ourselves, but when we look at, we were looking at what Watson was doing in healthcare and medicine, and with cancer patients, and it was just you honestly just stop, and you're just riveted on the fact that AI, we didn't call it artificial intelligence at IBM. We called it augmented intelligence, and it's just that it will give you a high predictability. Okay, we 99.5% that this is, the answer, or 99.3, and work your way down. But simply, they had oncologists, I should say, who would get together, the brightest minds in the world, and they'd be looking at a cancer patient, but they can't read, I think it was 5,000 new journal articles that came out on that topic every week. But Watson could. I mean, it's just being able to observe. So that whole AI concept is just absolutely phenomenal. But then when you look at where it is today, and we talk to a lot of leaders around emerging technologies and how they're using it, you don't have to separate it out from what you're doing. Like Netflix, it's built in, or any sort of software now, Sisense, it's built in. So we shouldn't necessarily need to call it out. We just should be leveraging it to get stuff done.
I think what I loved was, initially when you were talking about Watson and playing chess, you're going, that's awesome, but how are we going to use this in a day-to-day capacity that has any meaning that's beyond the fun of you won chess? And so I love that now you are hearing, how it's being used in day-to-day and medical context, and like you just sort of referenced. And then secondly, I love that now it's become more accessible and affordable. So it's not just something that big behemoth corporates can access. It's actually that technology has come down, more even into the SMB level.
Well, it should just be built in. I mean, it's just technology is an enabler. Machine learning, AI, natural language query, predictive algorithms, all this should just be part and parcel. And we should sell these. We should sell individual components. You want to buy some predictive today? And you want to buy some natural language query today? This is all built in to every solution. I mean, it should be just available to make a decision. I go back to data into information, information into insight, insight into action, action at the point of decision making. So that all that emerging technology should be able to get us to that point of making a decision, right? So that really insightful, hey, this is the stuff we really need to know before we make a decision. That's what emerging technology should be helping us with, and it is. I mean, look around, we're big consumers in our daily life, and I think it's here now with these emerging platforms or advanced platforms, in the work, in our business lives. So it's really cool.
What do you think what's the first step? Because I think if anyone's now heard this podcast and gone, okay, cool, I'm excited, I'm ready to go, I'm gonna put it into action. But what's the first step on that journey? Because it can feel overwhelming and daunting.
Yeah, so I go back to a couple things. One is you have to have a business problem you're trying to solve, or you have to have an idea. Monetization of data is something that we talk about a lot. People have tons and tons of data, and they're saying, okay, fine, we're looking for answers. I'll come back. I'm going to go with a tangent. So when we're talking about new business models, I was talking to a chancellor at a university, and we were having a conversation about, business problems. And she said, my biggest problem I have right now is I don't know where my students are. I'm like, well, what do you mean? She goes, we don't know if our students are overseas or if they're at home. We need to get in contact with them, see if they're enriched, because there's a lot of money with, overseas students coming in. And that was a big business problem for them, right? And they couldn't answer that problem with the data that they had. And so that's what we sort of sat down and had a conversation. But when you're looking at, I'd say one, have an overview of your systems, your legacy systems, see are you really going to be able to, if you resume your business, survive the next round of whatever is in front of us? Are you future-proofing your organization for the next 5 to 10 years? So take a look at your systems, take a look at your business problems, and just see what's out there, right? I'm really, sometimes I'm a bit surprised when I talk to CDOs and CPOs and CIOs and C-levels, and they, they're happy with Excel or they're happy with whatever they had because it's been ticking along, and they're not aware of the fact that emerging technology is built in and that you can now solve business problems and address business problems are going to come up. I'll give you a quick example. And we talked about infusing analytics. But, if you're an organization that has any sort of customer support center, and we've got customers who go in and they have, they get into their Excel spreadsheet and they take a look at which customers didn't receive their deliveries, and then they have to decide what they want to do versus, okay, they've got the reporting, they got the dashboards and analytics. That's all part and parcel of any sort of platform. But now these people are doing other work and they get an alert. Hey, Bob down the road didn't get his desk. Okay, here's some more information. So it's not information, it's insights. He's a strategic customer, high wealth, spends lots of money. 5th time it's happened, this year. What are you going to do? And have all those actions right there. So the person doesn't have to leave what they're doing. They can just address it there. Okay, send them a note, contact, the shipping department, send them a gift, blah, 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 blah. Take those actions right there and then is very, very powerful. And technology is not expensive, if you can assess the ROI. So it's having a business problem that you want to sort of address, looking at your inventory or legacy systems that you have, again, the pressure test that we talked about at the beginning, and then just seeing where you want to go, right? Being aware of what's out there, because you could have a significant competitive advantage if you're aware of what's out there, because everybody else is now looking at how to make it different, how to be different. That differentiation within a competitive market that is getting very, very crowded.
Yeah, and I love that, because I think so much of this now in sales is about how do I get that competitive advantage? How do I get the first mover advantage? And unfortunately, how do I not be blockbusters in the blockbuster Netflix story and get behind?
Yeah, and go back to the CEO saying, okay, well, I've got lots of data. We're data rich. We're okay. We're safe. And there are very clever CEOs who say, Mr. CPO or the CIO, you're now in charge of monetizing that. And we talk about monetization of data. There's 3 or 4 ways. One is you can just collect it and collate it and sell it. Bloomberg's do this, hotels do this. They just get everything, standard data, and they sell data sets. Or you can, build out a blueprint or a solution based on your industry that you've used before and create a standalone product. Or then the third way is just to embed this within your platform and offer either a premium or freemium service. Again, just imagine if you're an insurance company, instead of sending out emails to all of your agents can come into your portal, take a look at their own personal book of business, and have dashboards that they can drill down, again, with all emerging technology and emerging analytics that we talked about, and benchmark themselves. It's their own personalized portal. And again, people pay for value. So you can have a freemium version, you can have a premium version. And then again, the 4th level of monetizing data is really that value story, which is moving upstream. And how do you generate revenue or contain costs or increase customer satisfaction? And that's through embedding or infusing analytics within your own workplace, right? It's a very powerful story.
It is indeed. And I like how it's now coming to the forefront of the conversation. I don't think this was talked about a couple of years ago, but I feel like it's now on the table as a conversation.
Yeah, I think that, everything we see is like Gartner and the large GSIs, they're all doing studies saying, hey, okay, dashboards are good. That whole visualization of data is fine. But now we're capable through technology of doing so much more. And the early adopters will have that competitive advantage and will future-proof their organization. So if there's a recession or, a quick story, when COVID hit, I was working with a large insurance company, and they phoned me up and said, listen, we do our cash flow planning, quarterly, and now it's monthly, and now it's daily. And I said, okay, that's not good. And it's like, yeah, it's an Excel. None of us have been home for weeks, and yet when we had a bit of a respite from COVID, I phoned them up and said, okay, well, how are you doing? Oh, good. And do you want to sort of explore some options? And no, we're good. We're good. We survived. I'm like, okay, well, the next time you might not. And that's the story, right?
Yeah. And I think that is ultimately now, you never know what's around the corner. We've all learnt that over the past 2 years. And so I think, you've said it a couple of times. It's now the game is future-proofing your business and getting that head start. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. A lot of organizations are saying, okay, dashboards, reporting, analytics, table stakes now. But if I want to go further and what's around the corner, and this is, again, if you're a trusted advisor, you're showing them the state of the possible, the art of the possible. And you're saying, okay, well, here's what you could do in a few years' time. Again, you have to tie it back to strategic goals of the organization. But if you want to increase your market share, or if you want to increase your overall customer numbers, or your customer sat, or just retention, this is what you potentially could do. So, put this way at the back of your mind. You might not want to do it right now, but guess what? This is all incorporated within what your platform provides. So, why go off and buy 5 pieces of software when if you make the right investment? Again, I go back to future-proofing your organization. You might not need it now, but in 2 years from now, you just flick a switch and away you go.
And it's there. Yep. Rohan, I have absolutely loved talking to you. I feel like I could just keep going for ages on about 5 different topics. I'm like, oh God, I want to talk about everything. But I'm going to ask you, where can people find you if they want to connect with you, or they want to find out more about Sisense? Where can people connect?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the easiest, or just rohan.persaud@sisense.com. Either way, yeah, I'm pretty good on LinkedIn. And look forward to anybody who wants to know some more. Just ping me. I'd be more than happy to carry out the conversation.
Amazing. I have got so much from that conversation. I have notes of books to buy and things that resonated. So thank you so much. You've been an absolutely fantastic guest.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Abby.
Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to receive the inside scoop on what is working right now in our highest performing campaigns, and likewise, what are the pitfalls to avoid directly to your inbox, then simply visit insidescoop.salesredefined.com.au to make sure that you receive our fortnightly newsletter with everything that you need to know to stay ahead of the pack directly to your inbox. And finally, before you leave us, don't forget to subscribe to Redefining Sales podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed it, we would really, really appreciate it if you could leave us a comment, or perhaps share it with a friend or colleague who you know would enjoy it. We'll see you next time.